This is the Maten VTX Pro from GEPRC. It's a 5.8 gigahertz VTX that provides a massive 2.5 watts of output power. Oh yeah, and it's analog. But wait, didn't we decide that analog was dead now that we have digital systems from DJI, Walksnail, and HD0? Analog still offers some advantages over digital, and the biggest one is price. And you long-range guys know that you can get some amazing range out of a VTX like this as long as you have the right antennas and the right setup. It's also a little bit more predictable the way an analog signal will break up at range than a digital signal. You can fly through a lot of analog static and still have a good idea of where your drone is and where it's going. And when it comes to price, GEPRC has the Mark IV 7-inch and 8-inch that start at just $239 for a completely built and tuned drone. That's not too far from the price of just a single DJI O3 Air unit, especially if you use code FPV5 for 5% off. Huh? That code brings the price of the Mark IV 7-inch down to just $228. That's a whole lot of drone for $200, and it's a real argument for why analog is still relevant in 2024. Which brings us back to the Maten VTX. Let's have a close look at this thing and see what it brings to the table. The Maten VTX Pro comes in a handy plastic box, and here's what you get. You get a basic linear antenna and an SMA adapter cable. Both have right angle MMCX connectors and both are 8 centimeters in length, although the SMA adapter cable is about 10 centimeters including the connector. There's a hardware bag with M2 5mm and 12mm screws. There's a cable for connecting your VTX to your flight controller, some standard business cards. You also get an instruction sheet which is very detailed and actually very good, making it as simple as possible to connect and set up your Maten Pro VTX. The instruction manual does include the VTX table, and GEPRC also has it on their website in a handy file that you can copy and paste right into Betaflight. I'll put the link to that VTX table below. The VTX is made entirely from aluminum, and what that means is not only does it look cool, but the aluminum should help dissipate heat, especially with these cooling fins right here. And of course, there is active cooling, meaning a fan inside the VTX, and that should really help it maintain that maximum output power in a stable and reliable way. The VTX is 12.6 millimeters tall and 36 by 36 millimeters wide. You do require a fair amount of space for this VTX, so measure your frame to make sure it'll fit. The VTX has 20 by 20 millimeter mounting holes available. There are 30 by 30 millimeter holes, which are the screws that hold the case together. And I suppose it is possible to use these 30 by 30 millimeter holes, but you'd have to be very careful because those holes don't go all the way through the case. And so you'd have to use screws that are just the right length, taking into account the width of your carbon frame. The power input is 2 to 36 volts, which means that this VTX can be powered by battery voltage using anything from a 2 to an 8S LiPo. The available power output options are 25 milliwatts, 200 milliwatts, 600 milliwatts, 1.6 watts, and 2.5 watts. You also have pit mode. The review sample that I received has 48 channels, but I see that GEPRC just made a note saying that the production models will have 72 channels. So if you are interested in the Maten VTX, you're going to receive a VTX with 72 channels, not 48. So please check back here for a link to the updated VTX table, which is not available at the time that I'm making this video. On the right side of the VTX, there's a single function button and LEDs indicating power, band, and channel. It is possible to set up the VTX by long pressing this function button to make selections as the VTX cycles through the available options. There are instructions on how to do that in the provided manual, but it will probably be more practical to configure the VTX from your radio using tramp telemetry. It is nice to have the option to configure the VTX directly though, if you want to do that. The VTX does have a built-in mic, which is located inside the case to provide some protection from excessive wind noise. On the back of the VTX you have a connector, so you can use the provided cable and you don't have to do any soldering. For the pinout we have 7 to 36 volts, then ground, then VTX, which should go to the video out of your flight controller, then IRC, which should go to a free TX pad on your flight controller. And finally, there's a 5-volt and a ground pad in case you want to connect a camera directly to your VTX. This might be useful in some sort of application where the VTX is used without a flight controller. Setting up the VTX in Betaflight is super simple, and you can follow the instructions in the manual that GEPRC provides, but basically there are two things we need to do in order to allow our flight controller to communicate with the VTX. First, make sure you load the VTX table into Betaflight. This allows the flight controller to communicate with this particular VTX. GEPRC has provided us with the VTX table. You can just copy and paste that information into the CLI tab in Betaflight. Check the video description below. I'll provide a link to that VTX table. Then in the Ports tab, activate VTX IRC Tramp protocol in the UART where we connected our VTX. With those steps completed, your flight controller should be able to communicate with the VTX, which means you can configure the VTX with your radio. All right, you guys, I don't own any RF testing gear in order to show you the actual output power of this VTX, so we're gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. I've put together a low-budget, high-quality, long-range, well, at least medium-range cruiser that's ideal for the Maten VTX Pro based on the iFlight Chimera frame. And believe it or not, by hitting up the Black Friday sales from iFlight and other companies, I was able to put together all the ingredients for this build for about 200 bucks. Even paying full price for this gear, everything you see before you is under 300 bucks. This build will use the iFlight Chimera 6 frame, the iFlight ATF 435 stack with 55 amp ESCs, the GEPRC Maten VTX Pro, of course, Brother Hobby 2507 1500 kV motors, a Beta FPV Super D Diversity ELRS receiver, an iFlight Albatross antenna, a Caddx Ratel FPV camera, and of course the Maten VTX Pro. With the red accents on this aluminum case, it should combine perfectly with the iFlight Chimera frame and it should look super cool. And I am super happy with the quality of the gear that I'm able to get at a relatively low price. And that's why analog still has a place in my FPV lineup in 2024. What do you guys think? Still doing any analog, or are you guys done with that and gone on to digital? Let me know what your opinions about this build are and about the Maten VTX in the comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel because this build is coming up in a future video, and that's going to do it for this one. Thanks a lot for watching, you guys. I appreciate having you here, and I'll see you in the next one.